All right, here we go. I'm curious watching the game. I mean, obviously the goals, transition was the story of the game. Atlanta played a high line. They really compressed the midfield. You really had issues building out of the back and maintaining possession, and you did make a halftime substitution in midfield. But how much of that was your players' performance? How much of that was their tactics? As you go back and look at it later and not worry so much about the result, why did it play out the way it did?
I don't think you can dismiss the game state. Right, so when you go up 1-0, the team's at home, they're going to push more. It goes 2-0, they're going to push more, and so they're going to give you the ball over the top, right? They're going to compress the midfield, and they're going to make it difficult. And then you have a 2-0 lead, and so you don't really want to risk the playing. And so, having said that, a big part of our recap today was finding moments to control the game again. So in the second half in particular, there was a lot of moments where our pivots got on top of the ball, and what they were giving us was that ball in behind. Now, it's a cat and mouse game where you go in behind, you really can solidify the third goal, fourth goal. However, if you don't execute in that moment, now you're in a transition moment, and now you're not controlling the game, and now you're giving the opponents a lot of the ball. So it's really, game management for me has been a feature of what we've been talking about since the beginning of preseason. I think for the most part the guys are handling it well. It's just now managing the game with the lead is always the most difficult, and it takes the most experience, because when you see a guy 1v1 and Gozo up against the back line, you want to play it. But if you've been defending for 3 or 4 minutes, it's probably not the best decision, even though it looks like the best decision. And so that's a big part of the game. But again, I think what I'll always say about games, especially when we win, is every decision we made in that game lended itself to that result. So we will change nothing about that game. We'll continue to evolve in the moments that can affect future results, but change nothing about any winning result.
The flip side is opponents might look at that film and change everything and decide no high lines. They've only scored one time, when they walk the ball up and they're in the attacking third. 4 of the 5 goals are in transition. So guys, let's sit, especially because you're at home. Austin's going to be on the road.
No, and I think that's great. I think that just speaks volumes to what we identified that we want to improve upon, and our attacking transition is one of them. And I think now we currently stand, 3rd or 4th in the league in creating a shot after a regain, and we're number 1 in the league in losing the ball in our defensive half and not conceding a shot in 10 passes. So that is one area of the game we focused on and that we're really good at, and that makes me happier than it makes me really happy. The flip side of that is teams might sit back, and I don't think we've been able to see the qualities of our players in that phase, because we've had so much success in getting in behind and being more vertical. But guys, we got Diego coming back. Morgan Gilavogi, for me, is going to be one of the most influential attacking players in MLS. Obviously Aiden can operate in tight spaces, and so can Sergi. So we haven't been in that moment, but I feel really comfortable with the players that we have to be able to exploit defenses that sit in a low block as well.
Morgan seemed to drop really deep. Granted, all kinds of tactics and all that. Is he a little bit of a Swiss Army knife? Are we going to see him all over the place depending on the game and the score?
I think that's what makes him really, really unique. One of the things that we wanted to exploit against a 4-1-4-1 defensive shape was that there's going to be sides on either side of the deep line pivot, and so Aiden and Morgan had the free reign of dropping deeper to create the +1. And again, he's super comfortable in the build, super comfortable in the wide area stretching, super comfortable at the top of the box making decisions. He's just an all-around player, and I think his level of soccer knowledge, along with his technical ability, will have the ability to unlock defenses a lot differently than we did in years past.
How quickly can you bring Diego Luna and Victor Olatunji back as you try to protect calves and hamstrings for guys who haven't been running a lot?
Yeah, again, I think we have a really good performance staff, and we'll bring them in a way that won't compromise anything moving forward. Obviously this is a really important year for both Diego and Victor, and so I think, given that the guys that have stepped in there have done a good job, we can bring them along at a pace that is commensurate with their level of healing, and so we'll be really cautious with their integration back into the group.
Is there anything you could tell us to calm down the high expectations for Aiden Hezrakani? It's just goals and wins with that guy.
I'd say let's not talk about it and let him do his thing.
That's really not why we have press conferences, but sure.
No, he's been great. Again, I think one thing with Aiden is he's got really his level of emotional control is really high for a young player. He doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low, and I think his youthfulness and just letting shots go and not being worried about is this the right time to shoot or not is really, really important for him. He's been a fantastic young player, and now he's just growing into a really, really good pro. So my expectation is it's not going to continue in the same vein of form as far as goals every game, but he'll continue to improve and be a great pro.
You briefly mentioned Diego coming back. Is this the game that we will see him back on the pitch? And also, if it isn't or if it is, what does he add when he is out there?
Yeah, no, I think hopefully we'll be able to give him some minutes in this game. I think the last time that we saw Diego on the field in a game was our last preseason game against LA, and his ability to, again, combine with guys like Morgan and the pivots, and he was playing on the left side, so Juan Sanabria as well. Just a really good high-level soccer understanding. His pressing defensively, and then in that particular game, he got into the box 3 or 4 times and had 3 or 4 shots on goal, and then ended up scoring a PK as well. So I think Diego's shown what he can do, and now it's just about making sure we get him back in a great physical way to where he can contribute the way he can to help our team continue to win.
Something about this organization, you guys are always willing and ready to adjust, and I think the young guys is something we can nod to with adjustments, growth, confidence, and maybe a little bit of learning well by fire here. Just what are the pros and cons of what your young guys have been able to do out there when being thrown in like that?
Yeah, well, I think all the young guys have had exposure to the first team in one way or another, whether it's training with the group last year or coming to preseasons in years past. Aiden has been with us the last couple of years. This is Luka Moises' I think second time in preseason, so we've been able to look at them. And then more importantly, this preseason they were exposed to first division games against teams like Bromby and Randers when we were in Portugal, and they held their own. And so I think that preseason was really important for the young guys, and then Zach Booth as well, and Sergi as well, and it gave them a lot of confidence, and it gave the players around them confidence in what they were able to do. And so I think for as much as you have these young guys expressing themselves, I think it would also I'd be remiss to not mention the importance of the experienced players, the guys like Engel and Jay Glad and Hoffa and DeAndre Yedlin, guys that are supportive of this, because if younger players get the vibes from the older players and the experienced players, and if it's not there, then their level of comfort to be able to be who they are would change. And so it's really a testament to the whole group as to how these young guys are coming about.
Back at home against a good squad, but what are the vibes right now amongst this team that you guys are doing so well? I know that they're probably showing up with smiles more than ever. Yeah.
Again, we talk about overcoming a lot of obstacles that'll get thrown at us, and unfortunately it happened early days for us in the season, and going away to Vancouver and watching what they've done to the teams after us, I think is a good reflection of when we play as a team, when we play as 20 players on this roster that's going to this game, we are very unique, right? We might not have the experienced players that we wanted at the beginning of the season, but what these players have done as a group has motivated the rest of the team. And now, like even today, getting Victor and Diego back, you see a pep in their step, you see a pep in the guys that have been around, and so it's just this contagion where when the team is the most important thing, magic can happen. And I think that's the feeling we get when we come back on Monday, is the feeling that a bunch of different guys contributed this week than they did than the first game of the season, but the effort, the performance, and now the results are consistent, and I think that's an important thing, to believe in the processes that we have as a staff and as a club.
One more from me. What do you attribute your guys' just recent success, recent confidence to? Is it that mindset that you just talked about?
Yeah, I think it's the mindset, and it's also, I think it goes to what we talked about in the preseason, which was a lot of game management, where last year we wanted to play a certain way regardless of score, regardless of opponent. I think this year we're really intentional about understanding, we're away from home, but we still want to impose ourselves on the game. We want to be a little bit more vertical than we were last year. And then we have a lead. How do we manage the lead? And every game will teach us something about our ability to manage games. You know, I go back to the Vancouver game where we were down a goal, and we decided to go man-to-man defensively to create opportunities on goal. And so our ability to be adaptive to the game state and still hold our own is an important factor. And I think that's another, you know, feather in the cap for us that we'll continue to harp on and continue to improve upon.
Thanks, Pablo.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on this Austin team coming up?
Yeah, you know, they've had an interesting start. You know, they're a team that obviously have a lot of attacking firepower. They're you know, last year they had a pretty decent year. You know, I think MLS every team has an opportunity to win. I don't know if you saw it the weekend, you know, huge underdogs went away from home and got 3 points against New York Red Bulls and Cincinnati. And those are two big teams and two teams off to a good start. So for us, it's really about always being respectful of our opponents, knowing that anyone can win on any given day. And the onus is on us to be a better version of ourselves this week than we were last week.
How challenging does it make it for you to preview Austin when they got that early red card last week?
Yeah, again, it's tough. And that's why, you know, the first 3 days of our training week is always focused on ourselves and finding areas where we can continue to improve. The last bit is really about our opponents and the threats they pose. And so we'll get going on those guys probably tomorrow afternoon, if not Thursday. But like you said, Maddie, it's always tough when there's red cards. It's tough when you know their home performances are different than their away performances in their shape and their tactics. So again, that's why it's really important for us to really understand who we are, and regardless of the shape that we play against, that we have the tools and the know-how as to how to exploit these teams.
And then one more. You said after Atlanta, you were talking about the brotherhood in the locker room and with this team compared to other teams you've been around. How is that going to affect the fun challenge you're about to have, where all these players are starting to come back injured? You've had all these young guys who have been stepping in and dominating, when you're managing who's getting minutes and who's not.
Yeah, you know, I think if you put the team first, you know, those are always tough conversations to have with those players. But I think the most important thing for me is to make sure that everyone feels valued in the role that they're participating in, right? So there's some guys that don't make the 20, but their contributions on Monday through Friday are so necessary to prepare the group for the weekend. And so what I always want is a feeling that everyone has their fingerprint on a result that is positive, right? And it's not just on game day. And so I think the most important thing is to express to the players, who's ever playing has a huge responsibility for the group. Those that are coming into games also have a huge responsibility to close out the game, whether we need a goal or we need to protect a lead. And so I think the most important thing is that we're transparent, communication is really clear, and that we always put the team first.
Thanks, Pablo.
Yep.
With Luka Moisa coming in and being 17 years old and looking like just a MLS caliber midfielder, what do you attribute his ability to really step into that role at such a young age?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. You know, I think he had a really good season with Monarchs last year that gave him confidence. And you know, I think for me the pivotal moment was after the Brøndby game, and I went, you know, I pulled him aside and said, "Bud, you were fantastic." And he goes, "To be honest, Pablo, they're not as good as I thought they were going to be." You know, and so when you have a young guy that starts thinking like this and believing like this, it's the moment where I think he feels he belongs. And so I think, you know, with all these young players, they're you know, they come out of the gates really sharp and everything's, but what ends up happening is with a lot of expectations, not just from us, but really from the fans and the media, and they think that the trajectory is going to be a straight, it's going to be like a rocket ship. That's where you start to second guess yourself, you know. And so I think the important thing with these young guys is to bring them along in a way where they continue to get opportunities, continue to prove themselves, but also protect them from these expectations that might be a bit unrealistic given that they're just now cutting their teeth.
And continuing with the midfield, how likely are we to see Stein and Spearings getting minutes in this coming?
Yeah, you know, you know, the idea was for him to get minutes in the last game, and I wanted to give him, you know, we came to an idea that 10 to 15 minutes he felt comfortable with from a physical load. I just didn't think that game was one that was going to be productive for him to feel really comfortable. So hopefully this weekend we can get him minutes. We're actually also, with Victor coming back, Luna coming back, and some guys that haven't been playing games, maybe looking for the game on Sunday with the Monarchs to give those guys ample minutes so that we can get the group as close to whole as possible moving forward. But hopefully this weekend, Stem will hopefully get some minutes.